Before Askia Muhammad I, the lands of the Songhai lay in the shadow of larger, more powerful empires. The golden eras of past rulers had faded, and a sense of opportunity whispered on the dry winds that swept across the great Niger bend. In the city of Gao, a boy named Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr al-Churi was born. He was young, intelligent, and fiercely ambitious. As dynasties clashed and fortunes shifted like desert sands, he watched, he learned, and he waited. He saw the ruling dynasty falter, its leadership weakened by internal strife. And in that moment of weakness, he knew what had to be done. With absolute clarity and unwavering conviction, he seized power in 1493, overthrowing the previous ruler. This was not just a coup, it was the dawn of a new era. This was the beginning of Askia. From the dust of uncertainty and a land of shifting loyalties, Askia Muhammad raised an empire. He gave a people a new identity, a sense of unity, a shared purpose. He was no longer just a man, he was a founder, a legend. And our story begins right here. Askia's rise to power wasn't destiny, it was sheer will. It wasn't luck, it was profound conviction. He didn't bring chaos, he forged order. Under his rule, the Songhai Empire underwent a breathtaking transformation. Its borders stretched further than ever before, vital trade routes carrying gold, salt, scholars, and merchants flowed like rivers through the legendary cities of Gao, Timbuktu, and Jen. These cities became beacons of commerce and knowledge, attracting the brightest minds and the wealthiest traders from across the continent. But Askia understood that an empire built on trade and faith must also be defended by strength. He wasn't just a builder, he was a warrior statesman. He immediately set about reorganizing the military, expanding the army, and creating a professional, disciplined fighting force. He knew that to protect Songhai's prosperity, he had to be prepared for war against any who would threaten its rise. His rule wasn't about reckless conquest. Every move was strategic, disciplined, and purposeful. When neighboring states and rival factions underestimated the new Songhai leadership, they were met with a disciplined and formidable giant. Askia's forces moved with astonishing speed and precision. Villages that once stood defiant and former adversaries who had challenged Songhai's authority were one by one brought under the empire's banner, not just through force, but through a vision of a unified, prosperous future. This was empire building on a grand scale. At the very height of his reign, Askia Muhammad I had transformed what was once a modest kingdom into the largest and most powerful empire West Africa had ever seen. Its influence stretched from the Atlantic coast far into the Sahara Desert. Tribes and peoples who were once bitter rivals now looked to the capital city of Gao as the undisputed center of power, trade, culture, and faith. Askia didn't just conquer lands, he built lasting institutions. He was a passionate patron of learning, turning Timbuktu into a world-renowned center for scholarship. He established a standardized system of weights, measures, and currency, which supercharged trade across the empire. He implemented a fair and efficient system of justice based on Islamic law. By skillfully fusing faith and governance, he gave the Songhai Empire a stability and cohesion that many other kingdoms of the era desperately lacked. He created not just an empire of territory, but an empire of ideas. This incredible legacy of a unified, educated, and prosperous state is a testament to his vision. But as with all great empires, the seeds of both greatness and decline are often sown by the same hands. The very strength that built the empire would eventually be tested from within and without. Askia's later years were marked by challenges, including betrayals from those closest to him. His story is a powerful reminder that even the most magnificent structures can be vulnerable. The fall of an empire is often as dramatic as its rise, and the story of Songhai after Askia is a chapter filled with intrigue, conflict, and the struggle to hold onto a golden age. What happens when a visionary leader grows old? And what becomes of the empire they built with their own hands? The answers lie in the turbulent years that followed.
The battlefield had gone quiet, for now. Askia Muhammad I stood as master of an empire that stretched farther than any in West African history. This was the golden age of Songhai. Trade boomed, with caravans of gold, salt, and knowledge crossing the vast Sahara. Scholars from distant lands journeyed for weeks, even months, just to study in the legendary city of Timbuktu. Songhai's name echoed from the dusty plains of the Sahel all the way to the bustling markets of North Africa. Askia had achieved the impossible. He had not just conquered, he had built. But every empire, no matter how glorious, carries its own weight. And with that weight, come its own traitors. The very expansion that made Songhai great also began to reveal its cracks. To manage his enormous realm, Askia had placed governors, known as Fari, to rule the distant provinces. These were trusted men, his most loyal commanders, or so he thought. But absolute power has a way of corrupting. Soon, whispers turned into rumors, and rumors turned into truths. Greed began to poison the hearts of these governors. Some started hoarding taxes meant for the imperial treasury in Gao. Others ruled their provinces like personal kingdoms, dispensing justice as they saw fit, not as the emperor commanded. Reports of injustice and corruption crept back to the capital. Stories of small rebellions flaring up, of provinces simply ignoring imperial commands. Askia's hands were full. He had spent his life building this empire, and he would not watch it crumble from within. So, the old warrior rode out once again. But this time, it wasn't for conquest. It was for correction. He traveled from province to province, a whirlwind of imperial authority. He removed corrupt governors, replaced weak leaders, and established a new system of checks and balances to prevent any one man from gaining too much power. He was putting out fires, but the cost was mounting. The constant campaigns drained the treasury and his own energy. Then came the blow he never saw coming. It didn't come from a rival empire or a rebellious province. It came from within his own bloodline. Askia had many sons, over a dozen, and he had not named a clear heir. This uncertainty created a viper's nest within the royal court. While he was out securing the empire, his sons were at home plotting. Whispers in the shadowy corridors of the palace. Secret promises made to ambitious generals. Loyalties began shifting like the desert sands, unstable and treacherous. The sons eyed the throne, each believing it was his by right. And then, the one enemy no emperor can defeat, came for Askia Muhammad, old age. Now frail and losing his sight, the great conqueror could no longer lead his armies into battle. He could no longer see the faces of those he trusted, unable to read the loyalty or deceit in their eyes. Realizing he needed help, he made a fateful decision. He appointed one of his most capable sons, a man named Musa, to assist him in governing the empire. He hoped Musa would learn from him, would carry on his legacy. But power once tasted, became a poison for Musa. He saw his aging, blind father not as a mentor, but as an obstacle. In the year 1528, the unthinkable happened. Askia Muhammad I, the conqueror, the unifier, the builder of a golden age, was overthrown by his own son. He was stripped of all power, his titles rendered meaningless. Musa exiled his father to a remote, mosquito-infested island on the Niger River. From this lonely prison, Askia could only listen as the empire he had forged from nothing passed into hands not of his choosing. But the story of Songhai did not end there. Askia's legacy was rooted too deep to be pulled out so easily. The systems of governance he created, the trade routes he secured, his military innovations, they all endured. His spirit lived on in the very structure of the empire. Still, the betrayal had poisoned the blood of the dynasty. After Musa, rulers came and went, a revolving door of plots and assassinations. None could match Askia's strength, his vision, or his integrity. The golden age was over, and the slow, painful decline of the Songhai Empire had begun, a tragic lesson that the greatest threat to an empire often comes not from without, but from within. So, the great Askia Muhammad was gone. He wasn't dead, but he might as well have been. He was exiled, silenced, and betrayed by his own son. The vast Songhai Empire still stood on the map, a giant stretching across West Africa, but the fire that had forged its glory, the very soul of the empire, was beginning to flicker out. The man who now sat on the throne was Musa, the son who had committed the unthinkable act of deposing his own father. But where Askia had vision, Musa had paranoia. Where Askia commanded respect and discipline, Musa ruled through fear and suspicion. He was a shadow of his father, and under his shaky rule, the cracks began to show. Provinces that were once fiercely loyal to the empire started to grow restless. They felt the change in leadership, the shift from a firm, just hand to a clenched, uncertain fist. The army, once the most feared and unstoppable force in the region, began to fracture. Without Askia's brilliant military leadership, commanders fell to infighting and jealousy. The trust that had bound them together, the brotherhood forged in countless campaigns, was gone. It was replaced by plots and backstabbing. The empire was sick from the inside. And then, the inevitable happened. Askia's other sons, seeing their brother's weakness and perhaps driven by their own ambition or a sense of justice for their father, rose in defiance. It was a tragedy of epic proportions. A civil war erupted, not between rival nations, but within the royal bloodline itself. Brother turned his sword on brother. The sons of the great Askia were tearing apart the very empire their father had built with his blood, sweat, and genius. The Songhai Empire was bleeding out, weakening itself day by day, without a single foreign enemy even needing to draw a blade. It was a self-inflicted wound that would prove fatal. While Songhai was consumed by its internal chaos, a watchful eye was fixed on it from across the vast Sahara Desert. In Morocco, Sultan Ahmad al-Mansur had been observing Songhai's rise for decades. He saw an empire of legendary wealth, overflowing with gold from the south and controlling the vital salt trade of the north. He saw power, prestige, and opportunity. And now, for the first time, he saw weakness. The news of the civil war, of the empire tearing itself apart, was the signal he had been waiting for. He knew the time to strike was now. So, in the year 1591, al-Mansur made his move. He dispatched an army to march across the Sahara, a feat that was considered almost suicidal. His force was small, only about 4,000 men, a number that seemed laughably tiny compared to the massive armies Songhai could field. But this small army carried something that would change the course of West African history forever. They carried a new kind of thunder. They carried firearms. They had arquebuses, an early type of musket, and small mobile cannons. This was technology that the Songhai army had never faced on a battlefield. The two forces finally met at a place called Tondibi. The Songhai army was immense, tens of thousands of brave, seasoned warriors, confident in their numbers and their long history of victory. They were the masters of their domain, but they were utterly unprepared for what was about to hit them. As the battle began, the Moroccan guns roared to life. The sound alone was terrifying, a deafening crack and boom that echoed across the plains. Horses, which had never heard such a noise, panicked and stampeded, throwing the Songhai cavalry into chaos. The disciplined lines of infantry, so effective against spears and swords, broke as warriors fell, not to a visible enemy, but to lead balls fired from a distance. It was a slaughter. Courage was no match for gunpowder. The Songhai army, the pride of an empire, was shattered. The empire that had dominated West Africa for over a century, that had seemed invincible under Askia the Great, collapsed in a single, catastrophic day. The aftermath was brutal. The Moroccan army, victorious against all odds, marched on the great cities. Gao, the capital, fell. The legendary city of Timbuktu, a world-renowned center of learning and culture, was mercilessly looted and burned. Its scholars were scattered, its priceless libraries destroyed. The Songhai Empire was no more. It ended not in a blaze of glory, but with the smoke of betrayal, the poison of division, and the terrifying thunder of foreign guns. And yet, despite the tragic end of his creation, the name of Askia Muhammad was never forgotten. He is remembered in history not for the way his empire fell, but for the fact that he built it in the first place. He is remembered as the man who forged Africa's largest pre-colonial empire through sheer force of will, a brilliant intellect, and a deep, abiding faith. A man who rose from a simple soldier to become an emperor, a lawgiver, and a patron of knowledge. His story is a powerful reminder of how greatness can be built, and how easily it can be lost, not always to outside enemies, but sometimes, tragically, to the hands of your own blood. Let's dive into the final chapter of our story, the epilogue of a once mighty empire. The Songhai Empire had fallen. Its legendary cities were plundered, its formidable armies scattered to the winds, and its throne, once a symbol of immense power, was broken by the relentless hands of time and bitter betrayal. But long after the last wall crumbled and the dust settled, something powerful remained: the enduring legacy of Askia Muhammad. He wasn't just another warrior king, another conqueror etched into history. He was a true visionary, a builder of civilizations. Askia fundamentally redefined what leadership meant in West Africa. He didn't just build an empire of land, he constructed an empire of law, faith, and scholarship. While many rulers of his time, and ours, governed through fear and brute force, Askia governed through sophisticated systems. Think about it. He created a revolutionary tax structure that wasn't just about enriching the crown, but about supporting the great cities, the very heartbeats of his empire. He appointed professional governors, judges, and ministers, establishing a complex bureaucracy that became a model for countless future African administrations. He was a devout Muslim and brought Islamic law, or Sharia, to the courts, creating a unified legal framework. But and this is crucial, he didn't force conformity. He championed a policy of tolerance, allowing the diverse cultures and traditions within his vast empire to thrive and coexist peacefully. Under his patronage, the intellectual world of West Africa blossomed. Scholars from as far as Cairo, Mecca, and even Spain, fleeing persecution, found a safe haven in the famed city of Timbuktu. The legendary Sankore University flourished, becoming a beacon of knowledge that rivaled institutions anywhere in the world. In Askia's Songhai, books were the new currency of wealth and learning became the ultimate form of power. Even in his final years, forced into exile, stripped of his power, Askia remained a potent symbol, a symbol of unwavering strength, of meticulous order, and of unshakable justice. For decades, even centuries after his fall, his name was still spoken with deep reverence in the bustling streets of Gao. It was whispered in prayers at dusk and etched forever into the vivid, living memories of the griots, the master storytellers and oral historians of West Africa. And today, a tangible piece of his legacy still stands, defying the sands of time. In Gao, it's the tomb of Askia, a magnificent, towering mud brick structure that pierces the sky. It's so significant that it has been declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This isn't just a monument to a man, it's a monument to an entire era of African brilliance. Askia Muhammad I proved to the world that an African leader could be both a sword and a scholar, a mighty king and a humble servant of his people. And though the Songhai Empire eventually fell, his vision, his dream, echoed far beyond its borders. We see its influence in the structure of modern governments, we hear its rhythm in the timeless cadence of oral history, and we feel its power in the stories we continue to tell, stories just like this one. Because the truth is, legends never truly die. They transform, they evolve, and they live on in Chronicles, waiting for us to rediscover them. This story was brought to you by Chronicles. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more epic African history. Thanks for watching.